Okay, good afternoon. Get going in just a second. There's some updates to my platform on the back end, so I'm not sure if everything's working properly. I think we are live. If we are and you want to say hi, I appreciate it, just so I know you can hear me. But before we get going, I don't know why it's not. Usually it says live podcast and the date. I'm not seeing that. Hi, Mary. Okay, so can everybody hear me? Something's changed on my back end. I'm not sure what this means going forward, but we'll try to figure it out in the next, the next couple days. Okay, well, a quick look at the market. We weren't on last week, but it was a really, really, really good week for the stocks that I had been talking about. Viacom was up about 9-10%. A really good day today. And some of my other ones did really well. So if you followed on Viacom, great. You did phenomenal. If you want to take profit, take profit. I did take some. I'm happy with that. Very big ruling in Facebook this afternoon. We'll talk about that a little bit and the impacts of what that means politically or what have you when it comes to control of social media. But I also did a trade there where I just shorted Facebook. I think it should be down about $10 a morning based on an overshoot of the stock based on the news. But in any event, so glad to be back. I'm sorry I wasn't on last week. A lot of emails. I'm sorry, I didn't give notice that I was going to take the week off. I wasn't really planning on taking the week off. Early in the week, some things happened that I had to kind of divert a little bit. My attention was diverted a little bit, but in a good way. The result was I saw the enormous support that I have and this podcast has, and I appreciate that. And it was a good week for me. There's some things that are going to be legal issues that will play out over the next probably year or two. But a lot of people witnessed what happened here on this podcast a couple weeks ago with Mark Riccio and the claims that he made that are disgusting and ridiculous. And so they may not fully understand is that goes back about 2 years where he had posted something on social media and I saw it. And as a journalist, made him known that this is something that should be reported and covered. He made a long string of threats of retribution if I covered it, legal action if I covered it, financial ruin if I covered it, what have you. We have all those texts. We have all those documents in a phone call and in text messages. And then he proceeded to do that after I covered it in the election. And so that has to play out. That has had a further stream of actions that have taken place with other residents in town jumping on the claims that Mr. Riccio made that are baseless and nonsensical, but it is what it is. So unfortunately, last week was just, this is crazy. Let's just take care of this and run with that. And hopefully we can get back to normal when there are filings or things to talk about. We'll talk about that in far more detail. But I apologize for not being on last week. I know a bunch of emails came in. I don't know if I'm like the clock. I mean, yes, at 4 o'clock, I come on Monday through Thursday, and I know people count on. I'm trying to do a better job of letting know if I'm not going to be on. But as many of you realize, this podcast is not financially viable. It's not something that makes me any significant. Actually, at this point, it's not making money at all. I'm hoping it does in the future. My goal is to be larger and that sort of thing. But it isn't now. So I have other work to do. So at times that jumps in and I have to take care of that. So I apologize for not being on last week. So that being said, let's talk about a couple things with regards to the town and news in general. I hope everybody enjoyed the fireworks over the weekend. I was asked to ask a simple question. I will put a poll up on Brandford 7 later on today on where you prefer the fireworks to be. And one, obviously, Brantford Point is the more traditional. Many people prefer the more traditional spot. But what will be helpful when I post this is if you show pictures of where you were and what area of town had a good view. And did more people have a better view from Foot Park, or did more people have a better view from Brantford Point? The town would like to get an idea of where we stand in that regard. So I was asked by the Public Works Director to see if we can't get some feedback on that. So I'll be posting it after the podcast on the Facebook page. If you have some questions, let me know. The second thing we want to talk about, what did I put up for animal shelter, Facebook? And okay, so the animal shelter. So, we talked before, I took last week off before that about that Board of Finance meeting. Tonight, I believe it's tonight, is the Board of Finance meeting where they'll vote very likely to pass the animal shelter increase. In the time since that discussion took place, and if you're not familiar with it, the animal shelter came in at a certain number initially. It was approved by the Board of Finance, approved by the RTM in Brantford. Then they went out to bid, and it came in about 60% higher. There was an article in the Register or something that showed that a $1.1 million project in Hamden was increased to 1.7. Same thing. All the bids came in significantly higher. This is not just Brantford. This is happening on every project right now. The cost of goods is astronomical. Cost of getting tradespeople is astronomical. So I think that kind of supports supporting this project. Can it drop in price over time? Yes. Can, in that time period, interest rates increase? Yes. There's a lot of variables. So with regards to the size of this project, which is not huge, with regards to the timing of it, it makes sense to do it now. I also went back and watched the entire Board of Finance meeting from that. So I had watched the presentation and the speech by one Democrat who apparently is a Democrat in the 5th District on the DTC, who it was ridiculous. We listened to it. Many comments came in on it saying, thank you for covering that, because his statements were very, very insulting to the town and certainly Jim Finch. And to those who may not know who Jim Finch is, he's the finance director for the town. He's been the finance director since 1998. Before we get into a political battle, not only is he incredibly qualified, but he was hired by a Democrat. And before that Democrat left office, before Cosgrove came in, they gave him a contract extension to make sure he stayed in office. So he was always very well supported by Democrats, Republicans, had support from everybody. And then suddenly this gentleman gets up and just insults the hell out of him. And it was just nonsensical. But I had never seen this happen before, where Joe Mooney, Jim Finch, in his calm demeanor, starts explaining and defending the document that he wrote, which was easy to read. The guy said his head hurt. I feel bad for him because an 8th grader could have read this thing and understood it. Mooney stops him and says, you have no need to explain yourself. The respect we have for you is unquestioned. And I've never seen that. And I've never seen that, but it's something that we need to see more of. People are attacked. There's an element in Brantford, especially the Wayne Cook group and his 3 or 4 minions that have no problem lying and making things up about people. And when they're attacked, elected and appointed officials would do well to emulate Joe Mooney, to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. There's times I go after elected officials. There's times I go after appointed officials. But I hope on this podcast, I also stand up for them when they're attacked. I've had people, the housing authority, who many people, neighbors, were against, were angry about, and still are. It's disgusting, some of the things they've had to put up with. We should be sticking up for them too. Whether we agree with the decisions they made or not, they're still volunteers. They're still acting what they think is in the best interest of a project. But you have disgusting, nasty posts on social media by groups. You have horrible things, signs around town naming former commissioners to be removed. They're volunteers. And so seeing Joe Mooney step up like that means something. We need more of that. We need more people to say no. When Wayne Cook goes off, no, we're not allowing that shit anymore. When neighbors want to personally attack people, no. You can disagree. We can have debates over the merits of an argument, be for or against something. But if you can't do it without calling people names, if you can't do it without personally attacking people, you shouldn't be part of the conversation. And those running the meetings, the moderators of these meetings, should learn from Mr. Mooney's example. That was a spectacular thing. He does a great job at moderating meetings anyway. But taking somebody who got up there and insulted the town and insulted Mr. Finch, who does a spectacular job. Don't look now, but whether it's Jamie Cosgrove or Jim Finch or Joe Mooney, who have been there now for years, Brantford has one of the best mill rates on the shoreline, more services than any towns on the shoreline, has a massive increase in infrastructure, senior centers, schools, firehouses, libraries, animal shelters. Give me a town that has been able to do all the projects Brantford has been able to do in the last 6 or 7 years, and still has the lowest mill rate on the shoreline, still has a AAA bond rating, and still has $25 to $30 million in the bank in savings. Show me that. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So I don't care how much you think you're a financial guy, or you want to get up in meetings and sound intelligent, or your head hurt reading a financial document. I feel awful for you. There is no town that exists like that in the state. None. And this is why for the life of me, can't figure out what the Democrats are going to run against Jamie on, but you have nothing remotely close to that in the state. Look at that list for a second. With Jim Finch and Jamie Cosgrove and Joe Mooney. By the way, Jamie Cosgrove is a Republican, registered Republican. Mooney's a Democrat. Finch, I don't think is anything. He leans left. He's kind of like I am, where we lean left. We have an understanding of finance and economics, so we're not over the top, let's throw money at everything. But Senior Center, Community House, Blackstone Library Project, Walsh Intermediate School, Indian Neck Firehouse, Brantford Hills Park, Shoreline Greenway Trail, Animal Shelter, countless other infrastructure projects. Give me one town in the state who can do anything close to what I just described, still have a low mill rate, under 30, have trash collection, have a counseling center, have all these projects. Thank you, Jim Finch, is the only acceptable answer from the Democrats. If this guy wants to get up there and make these stupid statements at the Board of Finance, bravo to Joe Mooney for shutting that crap down. And bravo to anybody who realizes how ridiculous it was. This town, other towns come to this town to say, how are you doing this? How are you funding your pensions? How are you taking care of self-insured health insurance? How are you doing all the infrastructure? They come to this town to find out how they're doing it. If this idiot wants to stand up at a meeting and attack Jim Finch, well, good luck with that. And to Mr. Brockett and to Miss Everson, who are a point on the same page or getting advice from this gentleman who was moved to town 3 years ago, was on the Board of Finance apparently in Westport or Weston or something, who clearly has no idea what he's dealing with. Where do you stand? You're clearly with him. You're getting your talking points from this guy. I can't get past this simple concept. And I saw this with Ray Dunbar, and I saw this, and sometimes you see it with Republicans too, and then the minority, and it happens certainly on the state level. Why do people want to trash their own town? Why do people want to get up and say, this town is terrible to run? This sounds, by any objective measure, Brantford is incredibly well run. Incredibly well run. The Board of Finance is as non-political as it gets, and it's great. Finch is phenomenal. Jamie Cosgrove is a spectacular first selectman. I know that. I've covered the previous administration. I saw the issues that exist. They don't exist now. I don't care what a blowhard at the meeting gets up and says, whether it's this gentleman, I keep forgetting his name, or Wayne Cook, or whatever. They have agendas. Whether it's a need to get attention for themselves or to win for a political race, what have you, they have agendas. But there is no way an honest individual cannot look at the finances of this town and say, thank you very much, Jim Finch. It can't happen. You can't tell me you understand finance and not look at this town and say that. And so watching it, I very much admired the fact that Joe Mooney shut that down. When Jim Finch went to defend himself, Mooney said, hey, no need. Don't bother. It's not worth the time or the effort to go into this. we all have enormous respect for what you do. And to Mr. Mooney, I have enormous respect for what you do. And the same thing for Cosgrove. We need to see more elected officials stand up when other good people are attacked. We need to see more elected and appointed officials say something when they see good people attacked. Period. Reject that shit. And that was a really, really good thing to see in that meeting. That said, Animal Shelter is very likely going to move forward on the board tonight. And I know the Democrats have been fighting this. I know they've been looking for something to fight, and they've been talking about mismanagement. It's all nonsense. When you have the Handon project go up by the same percentage, you know it's just the nature of the beast. To the Democrats on the RTM, it's stupid to vote against an animal shelter. There's some things in life you don't vote against. You don't typically vote against fireworks, right? You know, you could talk about funding. Some should be raised by themselves. In general, support the fireworks. You don't vote against the animal shelter. And you can talk all you want about should we fund this? Should we have this project? My question with all these projects isn't should it happen. It's never been that. Even with the Blackstone Library, my question wasn't should the project happen. The question was, should it happen at this rate? The Blackstone project did not need to be the $5 million project it became. You could have solved the problems that they actually had, not the problems they said they had, the problems they actually had for a lot less money. With the animal shelter, you have a very different dynamic. And that dynamic is they raise a ton of money on their own. They've already raised a significant amount of money on their own. They already have money from North Branford. And then apparently Wednesday or Thursday night, they raised something like $180,000 at a fundraiser at the Pine Orchard Club. And Laura Bourbon, more than anything else, is spectacular at raising money. Now going to those people and saying, wait a minute, all your donations we're going to put on hold. We're going to send back to you because we don't like this increase, which is not significant anyway at the end of the day. Makes no sense. This is not where you want to put your political line in the sand. Want to fight something else, go be it. But fighting the animal shelter doesn't make sense. Now, you want to listen to some so-called finance guy from Westport and fight the animal shelter, knock yourself out, Mr. Brockett, and Everson, and whoever the hell wants to listen to him. But as someone who has covered politics for the last 10, 12 years, do not vote against an animal shelter. There's nothing to gain by voting against an animal shelter. And God help you if you voted for that Blackstone Library project, that bloated Blackstone Library project with a nice stone walkout deck, because every library needs that. Every library needs a rooftop deck. I mean, we know that, right? Of course. If you voted against that, if you voted for that, and you're thinking about voting against the animal shelter, we'll just say it now, you're an idiot. You're a fool. At the same time, one of the reasons this town is in a fiscal and financial shape that it can afford the animal shelter is because of Jim Finch, is because of Jamie Cosgrove, and because of Joe Mooney. It's going to be a tough year for Democrats. Yeah, you may just get more Democrats to show up to vote and blindly vote party. That may happen. But you're not going to be able to make an argument that the town is mismanaged. You're not going to be able to make an argument that the town cannot afford these projects, because the town is in very, very good fiscal shape. So that vote will come up at the Board of Finance tonight. I cannot see it being voted down. I think maybe I think it'll end up being 6-0. And on the RTM, Ricky already said he's voting against it. Who gives a shit? At this point, the rest of the people vote for it. It doesn't make sense not to. This would be one of the good things to get some party unity from both sides working together to get this project done. I don't know any other department that spends the amount of time on their own raising the money that Laura Bourbon does. And there could be an argument, and I've heard a legitimate argument, that our animal shelter does more than it should. It's basically the state animal shelter. We're no-kill shelter. We're taking dogs from all over the country. That's true. But that's one of the things that makes it a unique and special animal shelter. It's one of the things that makes us Branford. Our open space, our infrastructure spending, the type of town we have, our trails, all those things, along with the Cosgrove Animal Shelter, are things that help make us Brantford. Very much in favor of that project. Let's just get it done. Okay, moving on to the marijuana bill. Now, so I don't know what I wrote here. You know what? Before I get there, let me go through some comments. Good afternoon, Mary and Elizabeth and Jennifer, Maria. All those angry people who hate this town so much should move. So there are political games that are played, right? So you have to demonize the other side. If you've screwed up and went after Jim Finch, who's not on any side, that's a major tactical mistake. The other problem you have is those three guys I mentioned. Most people think Cosgrove's a Democrat anyway. He was a lifelong Democrat from a Democratic family, first of all. I can tell you this, because I know it. Democrats were mad when he ran, not because he ran, but because he ran as a Republican. They wanted him to run as a Democrat. So the nonsense about political party in Jamie is ridiculous. He ran as a Republican because the Democrats were messed up in this town. And they still are messed up. This is not a normal political party. Their actions are not normal. This is not actions of a group of people who are in the best interest of town. And I have seen many Democrats join the DTC because they want to get involved, they want to be a part of the town, and then a year later say, holy God, I'm out of that. I'm one of them. But I've seen many people do that. There's crazies on the Republican side too, no question about it. Democratic side just as a part. The Republican side, you have Cosgrove and Ray Ingraham, who are moderate, intelligent, reasonable people who, by the way, have given their life to Brantford. There isn't anybody in the 5th District that hasn't been helped in some way, shape, or form by Ray Ingraham. He is a friend of mine. I have no problem saying he's a friend of mine, and I would gladly admit that. At some point, he has either helped them with softball or field hockey or moving something or setting something up or planning and zoning. Everybody knows Ray Ingraham. He's dedicated his life to the town. Jamie Cosgrove, dedicated, didn't want to run for first selectman. Both parties asked him to run forever. This was not a political ambition of his. There wasn't some check on a sheet that I can't wait to be first selectman. He ran because of issues that were happening in the town. All the lawsuits, all the crap. Joe Mooney, just an honest guy. Smart, financially brilliant, honest. Ran the state's tax collection agency. Knows his shit. And Jim Finch, honest. These are degrees in political science and degrees in public policy and degrees in economics and educated men who know their stuff and are making those decisions. How do you knock that? Period. I don't know how you knock that. So at the end of the day, attacking, part of a political strategy is to somehow demonize the other side. But this seems like a really lost cause in this town. And that's why Jamie ran unopposed last time. Before that, Linda Mallow ran. Linda Mallow was a decent person. There's no question about it. Politics, people lose their mind a little bit. They raised a ton of money, and the margin was the same. Can it happen that a bunch of Democrats just show up and vote political party and call it a day? Yeah, it can happen. There's more Democrats in Brantford than Republicans. That can happen. But if you get there by lying and demonizing the other side, is that really where you want to be? You want to get in office from that crap? You want to get in office by jumping on the Wayne Cook garbage and the lies and the nonsense? You want to be against open space? He's demonizing green people. What's the problem with green people? Wanting energy efficiency in my town? I'm fine with that. So I question, yes, there's political strategy. There's the Machiavelli in all of us, right? Where we say, how do we win this? And what do we have to do to win this? When you have to demonize someone else that doesn't deserve it, that's done a really good job, we're in a better town because of those people, to stand up at meetings and demonize those people doesn't make any sense. And it says more about your own character than anybody you're talking about. And I say that as somebody who has taken a lot of shit from people in town who don't want to admit the town is well run. And they'll attack and they'll call you every name in the book. And that's what happens. We just need more people to stand up and say enough and defend those that are doing a good job. I hope we're doing that here. Mayor of the town is fortunate to have Jim Finch. The best hire Unc made was, I always tell Jim, he has guided this town financially so expertly and just admire him for so much he's done. I agree. Jeff Follett, how are you? Melody, thank you. Lori, thank you. And Jeff, yeah, the fireworks were good. I didn't watch the whole fireworks. The fireworks are literally, I'm not kidding, like 400 yards that way, maybe less, 200 yards that way for me. Loud as hell. I got home late, was at the casino, got home late. The cat was going in circles. It was just about crazy. The question on the fireworks that we're asking is, what do you prefer going forward? Did you have a better view from wherever you watched last night, or would you rather be at Branford Point? And I'm going to post that on social media after this video. If you have a picture, and Gary asked me to post this, if you have a picture of where you were for the fireworks, let us know the address or area, and let us see if and Jeff, and to those who don't know, Jeffrey Villette is on the Board of Finance, but he's also on the fireworks committee. So Jeff, great job. I heard a lot of good things. Somebody said, doesn't matter, they were all fine. But we do want to see, I was asked by Gary Zielinski to try to look at where the best location was for those. They've become a bigger thing, right? Food trucks and huge events. I've seen people with coolers, and it's a really cool event to have in town. So we're seeing, so perfect. From East Haven, we're seeing East Haven had theirs a little bit earlier, right? So if you were at Silver Sands, you probably had East Haven, and then you had Branford at the same time. So it was really cool watching a whole lot of fireworks on Saturday night. The final thing I wanted, what was it? The marijuana bill. And, you know, this is just quickly, I know somebody who wants to open a marijuana dispensary. And so we were looking through the law. And this is an interesting thing that we're seeing more and more with laws, especially laws that are controversial. The marijuana bill doesn't do much. Yes, it passes some stipulations where if you have up to 1.5 ounces or 4 ounces in a locked car or whatever, and 4 ounces of marijuana is a ridiculous amount of marijuana. But yes, so it's legal. But we won't have any sale of recreational marijuana for at least another year. But what these bills have been doing more and more, and they're all proud of, we signed this bill, we passed this bill, but the bill actually sets up the creation of another committee, and that committee will create the actual rules to do this. So we have legislators passing bills that don't actually set up anything. So when you go and read that bill, I have no idea who's going to be able to sell this stuff. Can a grocery store do it? Can somebody else? Is it a $500,000 price tag? Is it a $3 million price tag to produce it or sell it? We have no real information about it. Yes, we legalized it. But the people that we elected for office, that's the only decision they're making. Instead, they're going to appoint a committee, and that committee will make all the real decisions. So yes, it's great when we watch Lamont sign the bill. It's great when we see Scanlon and Cohen and Comey. I don't know if they all did or not, but in general put out, oh, we supported this bill and we passed it. But in reality, they passed a very simplified bill that takes so many of those decisions that have to be made and pushes it down the road and creates a committee that will determine things later on. Remember that when we see these press conferences. Remember that when somebody says, I voted to support X, because they really punted on 90% of the decisions. I voted to legalize it. That's great. But who gets it? Who gets access to it? Who can sell it? Which ways it can be sold? Which percentage of people go to this district and what census tracts it goes to? Those are all decisions that are key decisions that were punted on. They were not really made. But since it's called a marijuana bill, we give them credit for passing marijuana. Not quite. We have to hold off on judging that bill for at least 2 to 3 years to see who this committee is and the decisions that committee makes before we can even say, is this a good thing or a bad thing? So I heard all sellers must be financed through Anne Lamont's company. I very much but last week hopefully going forward. Issues I want to talk to people have asked in a little more detail, laws or what have you. So we may go in the near future and spend more time talking about issues. Always, if there's questions or comments, let me know. I'd be glad to talk about them in a future podcast. And I very, very much, and I mean this sincerely, I thank you so much for all the support. It means a lot, and all the messages and emails last week meant a lot to me. And so on that note, I want to hope you all have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow at 4.